Hey guys, so it's been a little over a year now that I've owned this mount here, which is the Software Bisque Paramount MyT. And when I first got it, I did a little bit of a first impressions review, but I always think reviewing products when you first get them is not very much a review at all. So now that I've had over a year to get familiar with all of its pros and all of its cons, all its quirks, I figured I'd re-review this mount and discuss everything I hate and everything I love about it with you guys. So it's just been an overview. The Paramount MyT is Software Bisque's transportable or mobile lineup for their mounts. Basically, it'll hold 50 pounds payload capacity. The mount head itself weighs 35 pounds, and the tripod itself weighs 20 pounds, which is pretty light. If you're going to buy one of these things new, it'll cost you about $7,500. And if you want extra 20-pound counterweights, each one will cost you about $300, which is a little overpriced in my opinion, but oh well. Alright, starting off with the pros about this mount. Obviously, it looks really cool, and you want all your gear to look really cool. So, yeah, it's got a nice red finish. It looks very futuristic. It's pretty high tech. It's got the premium look you'd expect when you drop $7,500 on a premium mount. Appearances do count for something, I think. You know, when you post on the store, you want it to be a little bit of a flex. So it looks cool. One of the other pros about this is it does track the sky pretty well. And that's pretty much the only reason to get a mount is that it can track the sky well. It did take a little bit of time to get it there, but it's a really consistent performer for me nowadays. You just need to figure out how to use it. And figuring out how to use it is not always for the faint of heart. It's not very user-friendly compared to other mounts that I've used and other premium mounts that I've used in the past. But it's a very consistent performer for me. I've been imaging with this with a 2300 focal length system, a 2032 focal length system with 2.4 micron pixels, and my auto guiding stays below half an arc second with an OAG. So it's very consistent, pretty reliable, and that's really the only reason to get them out is to have long focal length, consistent performance at high resolution, and that's what I have it for. That's not what I'm using it right now for, though. Obviously, right now I have just a camera lens set up on it. It's still nice for that, though. It's a good stable system, and if I want to shoot unguided, of course, it's definitely capable of shooting unguided with just a camera lens for however long I want to. One of the other cool things I like about this mount is that it's really quiet when it slews. This is at full speed. Indoors, it may be a bit misleading, but being outside here, I'm not sure how the audio levels are coming off, but it's actually pretty quiet. It's a lot less quiet than my old Atlas EQ6, which sounded like a coffee grinder. One other thing you have to be careful about is this thing has the same motors as the Paramount MyT, the Paramount ME2. So the motors are very strong, and if stuff gets caught in here, like your hands or fingers, it will crush them. So yeah, that's one thing you have to be careful about. It's pretty dangerous to use if you don't know what you're doing. You need to keep stuff clear of it all the time. And if you get cables bunched between here, it will mash up the cables and destroy them. So there's that. And last but not least, I think the most important pro to this mount is its ability to find mechanical home. This means the mount can slew to a certain position on startup, and based on that position, it can reload its periodic error data, and you can constantly have periodic data error loaded into the mount, and it will always work because you always home the mount at startup. So to home it, you just double tap on the hand controller twice, or use a laptop, and then it will slew itself to its mechanical home, and then from there it'll always know what its periodic error is and where it's pointed from mechanical home. And this is just nice to, keep your periodic error lower. It's also nice for remote applications, which I haven't gotten to do yet with this mount, but that was part of the reason why I got it, because I wanted to eventually make the system remote. And that's one of the main pros with Paramounts is they're pretty well tested for remote applications. So hopefully it'll perform well there too. Alright, now that we got all the good stuff out of the way, I get to complain and talk about all the things I don't like about this mount. And there's a number of things I don't like about it, even though it is a good performer for me, and obviously I've done a lot of images with it. It does have some design problems. One of the ones that I think is pretty important that I didn't realize was a huge problem until later on is that the through-the-mount cabling on this mount doesn't actually work as well as maybe advertised by the SkyX. So the way the through-the-mount cabling works is you shove the cables through here on the back end, through the mount head, and then up to the top of this deck plate, and they come out here. That's all well and good, but the problem is there is a narrow channel machined on the bottom of this thing. This is called the Versa plate, where you mount everything to the mount. The channel doesn't actually leave you enough space to put any extra cables in. You can really squeeze them in, but there's a big problem when you try to slew very far in deck. And the problem is, you can see with this channel where the cables are cut out, if I slew too far in deck while exercising the mount, you will eventually come to a pinch point where any cables that exceed, you know, what you're able to squeeze in here, what Software Bisque has by default, you're going to actually bind the deck, and you won't actually be able to slew in deck because the pressure on the cables will be so high, and you can risk damaging your gears that way. And I found that out myself when I was like, why isn't my mount slewing in deck anymore? It's because there isn't actually physically enough space to do through the mount cabling like they say there is. So the only way you'll be able to actually do through the mount cabling on this mount is if you have a custom machined dovetail, or a dovetail with enough space on the bottom here where you can bring cables up through the bottom of the deck head. And I'll show you the space here. Let me just take off this camera. Also, never do this. Never have the mount unbalanced. Don't be stupid like me. So you can see here, cables come up through the bottom, and they're supposed to go through the bottom of the Versa plate. That doesn't work. So the only way you're going to be able to fit cables through is if you have a dovetail plate that's machined so that there's a hole right here and you can shove USB or power cables through. Otherwise, there's really no way you're going to be able to through the mount cable with this mount, even though it's supposed to be able to be through the mount cabled. There is not enough space to do it. There is through the mount power if you use the auxiliary mount power cables. You can see here there's an auxiliary power port. So if you purchase the proprietary cables or whatever, you can actually route power through the mount and the built-in cables, which is all well and good, but that's not how I have my power system set up. I was just assuming I could run the 2.5mm power plug or whatever size standard it is through the mount, but that would not fit along with the USB 3. So, alright, another big design problem with this mount is the USB port. You can see here it's a USB 2.0, and you can probably tell by the way this is that this is really likely to shear off and break and damage your circuit board. It happens to everyone. It's almost happened to me. You can see my USB 2 is already really loose because I've accidentally caught my cable before. Software Bisque solution for this is a plastic cable router, which you can see mine has broken because it's a plastic cable router. It's going to break. For a premium company, and if you're spending almost $8,000 on a mount, I think it's pretty stupid to recommend a plastic cable router to fix the design problem with a crappy USB 2 plug-in. There's other premium mount companies like 10 Micron that have Wi-Fi built into the mounts. Software Bisque sells a Wi-Fi unit to put in the mounts. I don't see why it's not built in already when other premium mounts have Wi-Fi built in. Adding a silly little plastic thing seems like kind of a dumb solution to me, kind of cheap. It's going to fail, and this is also going to fail. It's a band-aid on a design problem, and I'm really not much of a fan of that solution. So that's another problem. Another kind of cosmetic problem, which is a bit annoying, is that the mount is anodized in red color. And you know, when you expose anodized metal to the sun, ultraviolet light will eventually fade away the color of the anodization. So what once started as a nice red Paramount, left in the sun for long enough, will one day turn pink, and then hopefully one day silver, which is okay. I mean, it's a mount, it's not meant to be in the sun. You're supposed to be using it, at night to look at the night sky. But if you're going to use this for solar, you just have to keep in mind that it'll turn pink, which is whatever. I'm okay with my masculinity enough to have a pink mount. Some people might not be, but it still looks cool, I guess. You can custom order these to be aluminum or non-anodized at all, which probably would have been the proper way to go. Being where I live in Arizona, it's always sunny, and if I leave my mount out at all, it's going to turn very pink. So that's just the way it goes, I guess. By far, the worst design flaw, I think, with this mount, and it's one that I don't think even Software Bisque fully understands themselves, is called crosstalk. And if you look on the Cloudy Nights forums or the Software Bisque help forums, you'll see thread after thread after thread of people talking about this and loosely explained solutions that don't really make sense, and sometimes the opposite of what they recommend will fix the problem. Essentially, crosstalk occurs when you're auto-guiding, especially when you're close to the North Pole in the sky when you're imaging. So let's say we're auto-guiding along, right? We're doing RA corrections, that's fine. We're guiding in deck in one direction. And let's say we've been guiding south in deck, and we've just been doing pulses in that direction. And then let's say we accidentally go over the midline and we flip to doing north corrections. And then we have to push deck back the other way. That's when the problem happens. When your mount decides to do a correction in the opposite direction, it will throw the RA axis off. And it can do that to extreme magnitudes, enough to completely ruin subs with how they've tuned it from the factory. And that's what I was experiencing when I was shooting with my refractor. I'd be pointed north, I'd do a flip in my deck correction, and then it would go boom in RA, and that sub would be lost. And I'd lose sub after sub after sub. And that's frankly not very acceptable to me to, spend that much on a mount. And then just because your deck direction flips, your RA freaks out. That doesn't make sense. There's really no consensus online to whether or not this is an electrical issue or a mechanical issue. I have no idea. The solution for me, I guess, in a way was mechanical. What Software Bisque will recommend to you is to adjust the tension on the spring plunger, which will involve opening your mount through this port and going at it with 2 screws on the deck spring plunger. And these need to be very carefully fine-tuned while guiding at high declination until the problem goes away. The thing is, the problem will never go away. At least it never went away in my mount. It just diminished enough to the point where the deflection in RA was below that of whatever deflection was happening in deck, below the image scale that I was imaging at. So it was negligible, but it still occurs. So I was never able to completely get rid of it in my mount, and I think that's a pretty huge design flaw. Like my $1,000 used Atlas that was over 10 years old, it can guide in deck without having any influence on RA, which is a totally orthogonal axis. It really doesn't make sense that guiding or slewing in one axis should affect the other one, and it can cause a huge headache. Too many nights were lost, many hours down the drain to figure that out. So yeah, that's probably the biggest design flaw with this particular mount, is that the deck axis and the RA axis do have mechanical or electrical interference in some way, which can make guiding and tuning the mount a huge pain, and frankly I don't think it should be that way with a premium mount. I would expect to do some tuning with a Skywatcher or Orion mount being produced in China. I mean, you get what you pay for with that, but if you're spending this much, you shouldn't have to be opening your mount and tuning it very carefully. It should just work, and these axes should be independent, but they're not. So that's the thing I like least about this. All right, and probably one of the other hugest cons about this mount is the customer support structure that Software Bisque has for this mount. It's pretty bad. So the way Software Bisque handles their customer support is through an online support forum, kind of like Cloudy Nights. You post and then people online will answer your questions. These people are not Software Bisque engineers. They're other people who are also as confused as you and may have also had the same problem. Getting a hold of someone who's the actual Software Bisque engineer is pretty difficult. So if you want to get any valuable support as to the mechanical reason for axes interference, then you pretty much will never be able to get into contact with anyone who can actually tell you why it's happening. I still don't know why. I've posted many times on the forums. I've gotten one of the owners to reply once, but again, never very helpful. And it's always the same recommendation. Look to the same manual, do the spring plunger adjustment, and then bing, bang, boom, your problem goes away forever and everyone's happy. Well, that's not the reality that I experienced, and I wasn't able to get anyone to help me enough to completely make the problem go away, let alone find some kind of way to get a replacement. They will be very harsh on you if you think something's wrong and you want a replacement on anything. They will make you prove it. And I guess that's fine if they expect their mounts to be premium. They want you to be able to prove that it's not user error, because of course their mounts are very complicated to use and it's probably you messing it up. That again, I had a year of messing with it and I was never able to completely iron away the problem to nothing. So the support forums, they'll be harsh, pretty unhelpful, very hard to get into contact with someone who will actually help, and overall not a very fun time. For something like this, I would hope to be able to call and talk to an engineer that could actually, help with the problems. So the pivotal question is, after a year of owning this and dealing with all its problems, would I do it all again? Would I drop all the money on this mount and suck it up and deal with all the problems and whatnot? And the answer is probably yeah, but not for really good reasons. So the way that the premium mount market is set up right now, it's not very option full, shall we say. About 2 or 3 years ago, you would have had a couple more options around the same price range, and if you're in the States, you'd namely have 2 options. You would be deciding between the AP Mach 1 or the Paramount MyT. And granted, I have no experience with the AP Mach 1, but it's also a tried and tested mount, probably similarly to the Software Bisque MyT, probably more than the MyT actually. And if that were an option, I probably would have gotten the Mach 1, but it was discontinued by the time that I got this mount. And there's not really anything left in this price range. So the only other options would be the 10 micron GM1000, which will run you 10 to 13 grand if you include the tripod. The AP Mach 2 is coming out now, and it'll also be about the same, about 13 grand. So the only other premium entry-level mount option left below $10,000 is this mount. And it does the job for me now, but it was very difficult to get it to the point where it did work well. So if there were any other options below the price point of $10,000 that were premium mounts, preferably made in the US, then I would have gone with those, but there aren't anymore. So this is really the only option. And it works for me now, but it was very difficult to get it to that point. So yeah, in general, I would lightly recommend getting this mount. It works, it tracks pretty well at high resolution for me, but along the way, I learned a lot of lessons about premium astrophotography companies. A lot of companies will lean on a premium reputation to get you to buy their stuff, and then the customer support network isn't there, the technical support network isn't there, and then sometimes the product quality or quality assurance also isn't there because it's premium. And then when you go to try to get the solution done, no one will acknowledge the problem because it's premium and it's probably user error. So all in all, just be careful whenever you're buying stuff, and be wary when people say things are premium, because that means that you know, they think it's too good, and that if anything goes wrong, it's you and not them. And it could very likely be them and not you. So yeah, just be careful out there when you're buying. Hopefully if you get one, you get a good sample that's not like mine. I know this isn't a very glaring recommendation to get this mount. I've essentially said there's no other options in this price range. This is kind of the only one you have to get, but it is what it is. Maybe there'll be another premium mount at some point that falls within a reasonable price range, but this really isn't a affordable hobby, and mounts are definitely not affordable at all, at least premium ones. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you find this helpful if you're looking to get premium mounts at all. Yeah, just stay informed whenever you're buying things that are expensive. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed.